Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I am excited about our next topic, the power of planning, year end financial strategies, and future planning for cannabis operators. And before I dive in, a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry in 2009 here in Denver, Colorado. And in 2015, I founded my company, ICS Consulting, and I've been helping cannabis operators navigate the regulatory landscape now for 10 years. Everyone, give a really nice, big, warm welcome to my next guest, Jessica Velazquez. And Jessica is a CPA, CFE, and Principal Cannabis Practice Leader at Beach Fleischman. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Jenny. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. And why don't you give everybody a little bit about your background and when you entered into the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. First, just congratulations on your 10-year anniversary. That's a
Thank
huge
you.
milestone.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I've been practicing for over 20 years now. Really started my career in big corporate America, big public accounting firms. And my specialization has always been tax. I have a master's in tax. I have found great joy in doing this work across my career, but I fell into cannabis in 2015. So, like you, Jenny, it's my 10th year anniversary.
Wow.
In the industry, I started doing consulting here in Nevada, where I'm based out of, and one client led to another. And I created my own CPA practice, formerly or known as Indiva Advisors, back in 2016. Last year, I had the great privilege of merging with Beach Fleischman, so my cannabis practice, into the firm. And as you mentioned, I now serve as the cannabis practice leader for the firm.
I love it. That's amazing. I feel like we must have met maybe 2018, 2019, and it was when the industry was exploding. I'm so glad to know you, and I'm really happy that you're here. We were reminiscing earlier. I was on a webinar that you hosted, and now I get to host you on the podcast. And so, yeah, I'm really excited that you're here.
It's good to be amongst friends. And yeah, now I'm on the hot seat.
Yeah,
Um,
now you're on the hot seat.
you believe it's been that long and how quickly the time has gone in the industry and doing the work that we're doing with
Oh
clients?
my gosh. Yeah, it's incredible. It's evolved so much. I feel like I've evolved so
Yeah.
much as somebody in business, and I'm like a bottle of wine
Yeah.
finally aging with yeah, just and my maturity and ability to help clients in the cannabis industry. It's amazing to see all of us and as we're all evolving in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, that's right. It's dog years, right? The industry says we're living this in dog years, but it's been a heck of a ride. I'm still quite enjoying all of the work and change. The constant change to me is it keeps me on my toes, and I really enjoy that aspect of the work that we do.
Yeah, I agree. This is a great topic. I'm so glad to have you. We are at the end of 2025. We're in the last quarter. And so it's the perfect time to bring you on and talk. You're in that area that I'm in. That a lot of times people don't like to talk about compliance, they don't like to talk about taxes, financials. It's that's so uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about those things. But I think this is the perfect time to have you on and have these conversations. So I thought it'd be great to first start off with a recap of 2025 and what we saw. And then from your vantage point, like what were some of the biggest financial or tax surprises for cannabis operators in 2025?
Yeah. I think the big story, and I'm sure, I don't know if it's much of a surprise at this point, but the industry continues to see its challenges.
Yeah.
Specifically on the financial side, we've seen a lot of Smaller operators go through transactions, a lot of M&A activity, a lot of smaller folks exiting, a lot of consolidation in the last year for certain. Liquidity, cash flow
Mm-hmm.
continues to be an issue. We're all aware that some folks aren't paying their bills,
Yeah,
and that has a trickle down, trickle up effect to all of the players in the ecosystem, us included, too, right, Jenny?
of course.
Right.
It definitely affects us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think challenges in liquidity and cash flow issues continue to be an issue. I think the maybe big surprise was that we saw nothing on rescheduling.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
I think we were all really excited to see some action in DC with respect to that matter. And this administration has had other priorities. And so that has gone by the wayside. And so that's, I think, been challenging and a little bit of surprise.
Yep.
And then let's not forget the most current news in the last 30 days,
Oh, yeah.
where hemp is now going to fall under the definition of cannabis as we know it now. They have a timeline. We're now under a year, now under 365 days, where we either see some action on the legislative side or we're going to all find ourselves on the same boat here.
And it's going to go back under the Controlled Substance Act, and it will be exactly where marijuana is, which is a Schedule 1.
Yeah, absolutely. So the loophole in the Farm Bill is officially or will officially be closed
Mhm.
if, again, no other action has been taken on that. Selfish plug here, but I did do a webinar too a couple weeks ago with my friend Craig Small from Clark Hill on the
I
matter.
like Craig Small. Yes.
Good guys, a lot of great folks out of Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, just talking about what the hemp operators need to know as their ticking time bomb is going day by day here. Lots of changes, I would say,
Mhm.
in that realm. And that one, I think, caught us maybe all by surprise, or a good majority of us.
I think that was a good summary and definitely surprises. Uh, the hemp thing, really. I think some people saw it coming. I think some people who didn't see it coming, they were in denial about it. One of my other questions too about looking back at 2025, were there any kind of tax trends or financial trends that stood out the most around cannabis operators?
Certainly in the mature markets, right? So let's call it west of the Rockies, we're continuing to see price compression. Margins are very tight. Prices continue to drop, whether that's due to oversupply, increased competition. As I mentioned, a lot of consolidation. So we have some larger operators that work differently in the industry in terms of their margin realization. We're going to continue to see that. I think I mentioned west of the Rockies, but certainly states like Illinois as well. We're starting to see some compression there,
Yeah.
Michigan. So I think that's going to maybe continue as we move into the next couple years or until we see really something happen on federal policy and legalization as a whole.
Yeah.
But price compression, shrinking margins is the story.
Yeah, and I know in Michigan they approved the 24% tax. They did try to get an injunction. They went to court. It got rejected, and it is actually going to be happening. I believe sometime in January. I don't know the exact date.
Yeah.
So it's going
Yep.
to be interesting to see what the fallout could be potentially on that. It does get passed down to the consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think that was one of like my pain points at a time where we're seeing these industry pain points. Increasing taxes is likely not the right move. But yeah, we'll see how this impacts our operators and customer base in the state of Michigan and how that unfolds.
My next question was going to be about pain points. Were there any
Yeah.
other pain points that you can think of that maybe people were faced with this year?
Yeah, I would say it's maybe response time to changes in the marketplace.
Oh, that's
I do think that there's certainly financial impact related to the timeliness of changes within the operations of our cannabis operators, right? So some were maybe slower to react. So that had some financial impact, certainly for them.
yeah.
So I would say just slow reaction time, but we also continue to see, and you mentioned this earlier, maybe some bad operators. And so I think we're starting to see the fallout of those players too in the space. Unfortunately, all of those have financial impacts.
Yeah, I was reading a study. There was just roughly $10 million in violations last year in 2024 across the United States for regulated cannabis operators.
It's a big number.
Yeah, and then also too, I think a pain point which we brought up, which is the non-payment and the trickle effect, how that affects everyone. If my clients don't get paid, they might not pay me, or if my clients aren't getting paid and they're getting strapped and squeezed, they can't reach out and have an audit. I have that happen with some smaller operators. They want to get an audit, but they're owed so much money by other people that they can't even pay for the audit to make sure that they're in the compliance. It affects all the licensed operators, it affects ancillary companies at every level. And I think that's a pain point for all of us, really.
Yeah. We've seen it for a couple years now, Jenny. I think the last high tide of cannabis was COVID and year or two after. But in the last few years, we've started to see, again, non payment, liquidity issue, cash flow issues. And the end of 2025, no different. I think folks are writing off some accounts receivables. On the financial side, we're really assessing collectability. Are those monies really going to be paid and collected? And just having that real discussion with our clients
Hmm.
as to the reality of where the cash flow is up and downstream. That too, though, I think has its upsides. I do
Yeah.
see more clients being diligent about extending credit, changing their payment terms as well. So we're starting to see some of that cash now that we saw pretty early on in the industry. So again,
Yeah.
I think changes in operations based on what we're seeing and where the trends are going.
I also wanted to jump into why quarter four matters and that the fourth quarter of the year, it can be challenging for a lot of people. There's so much going on. We have holidays, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to get ready for taxes and people are feeling squeezed. And not only that, they're trying to get all their bills and invoices, and everyone's getting ready to get everything submitted to their CPA or their tax account. And there's so many things, different things going on. I wanted to talk about quarter four, which is the planning quarter. And like, why is the fourth quarter so critical for cannabis operators?
Yeah. This is my favorite quarter of the year, by the way. Accountants, we tend to be planners. We like knowing what's going to happen. I always say I'm a huge fan of minimal to no surprises, specifically when it comes to taxes.
Sure.
And our clients tend to like that and they agree with that philosophy. So a lot of planning, there's a lot of conversation that ideally is happening in this fourth quarter. And I alluded to a couple of those, like the write off of AR earlier here, but it's really that final chance, Jenny, to take a look at the financials with your advisor and make some real assessments, right? It's the last chance, if you will, for us to affect the 2025 year
Yeah.
before December 31st. And while because of the Schedule 1 and 280E implication for licensed state cannabis operators that, don't have the option of taking advantage of the full tax code, but our hemp clients that didn't fall in that space for tax year 25, there was major tax legislation passed over the summer, the big, beautiful bill
Yeah.
in July of this year, and just making sure everyone's aware of the law changes, how it impacts them, benefits that they're able to take from it, and just staying informed. So I do think this is that critical time of the year. Encourage everybody really to engage in a healthy conversation with their CPA or tax person, but whomever that professional is,
Hmm.
but really to engage in conversation. And I'll add here, Jenny, just as a side note, if you're only meeting with your CPA, your tax advisor, your professional once a year, I think something's wrong. I would encourage everybody to engage in a healthy conversation once a quarter. There's different timelines of the year, and we know that our clients are heads down, right? They're heads down in operations and the day to day. And so they're generally working in the business. Those once a quarter discussions with your professional provide that opportunity to work on the business.
Yeah.
And so ideally that professional, those conversations are really honed in specific for the items that you might be covering that quarter. So for example, in Q1, we'll hit a whole nother host of subjects as we start the year. 1099 reporting, W-2 reporting, tax return filings, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, that's really good information. And I really like what you said about you should be talking with your financial professional more than once a year, quarterly. I feel the same way when it comes to compliance. If you don't
Yeah.
have a full service compliance team, you're that mid-size operator to small operator, then you should be engaging with somebody that's coming in and auditing you like 4 times a year, talking with them or having those conversations. So I think that's really helpful. And what should operators be reviewing in their books right now before the year ends?
Yeah, great question. Some of the items I'd encourage folks to look at, starting really with the balance sheet. Let's look at inventory. Is there inventory that is obsolete, that has expired, that we need to write off, right? Off of the financials. I often see a lag in truing up the financials for what is actually in physical inventory. We know that it's required in most states that physical inventory be done by the respective cannabis oversight boards. But there's, again, generally a lag by the time that we see it in the financials. So just even getting that more timely, having that discussion again with your professional, if you're seeing major movement in your ending inventory on the balance sheet, which then also impacts your cost of goods sold on your profit and loss. Another major area on the balance sheet, again, would be these accounts receivables,
Mm.
right? Are they aging? Are they collectible? What's the status on possibly receiving payments? And getting really honest with what that's going to be and whether a reserve is needed or not. And an area that you mentioned earlier, and we touched on briefly, was your vendor relationship. So this is now accounts payable. Did you record all of your outstanding invoices and payments? Do you have a good view of what those are? And ultimately, the cash flow, right? What's the payment schedule for those invoices due? So,
Yep.
balance sheet.
That's great. That's so helpful. And then, so how can operators estimate and plan for their tax liabilities to kind of avoid the surprises?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is the right time. This is when ideally you are working with your professional to look at the financials as they are to date, and assessing what the tax liability is going to be for 2025, at least at an estimated level. But again, the conversation should include, hey, we're thinking about writing these receivables off. hey, we might have some adjustments to our ending inventory. Hey, we need some additional work done on allocation to our cost of goods sold, maybe from G&A. So that's really where this work is being done and the conversations are being had. But ideally, you should be stepping into 2026 with a fairly good understanding of what the tax exposure is for
Yeah,
2025.
I
This
like
is
that.
where we remind clients that the Q4 estimate for taxes is due January 15th, and also setting expectations as to when the return is going to be filed. In the perfect world, Jenny, again, you already should have a good idea of what the tax liability is. So, filing the tax return in the subsequent year and the following months is really just more, should be an exercise of just the actual documentation or the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
We should all go into that tax return generally knowing what's going to be reported and what the tax exposure is.
Yeah, that's really helpful. My next piece is talking about tax liabilities and avoiding surprises. So, continuing that conversation, what are some of the biggest tax pitfalls cannabis operators should avoid at year end?
Yeah. Again, I think here we almost always see a delay in the financial reporting for what the true allocations are to, let's say, cost of goods sold.
Yeah.
We all know that 280 prohibits the deduction of what I would call general expenses or below the line expenses and only allows the deduction of cost of goods sold. And so that's a key area of focus for us and the work that we do with our clients. Primary focus here.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is generally we'll see that there is a just lack of timeliness on those allocations. We encourage everybody to, again, address those on a more regular cadence, whether that's monthly and you're making those adjustments. Ideally, it's quarterly, feels like a good cadence for all of the operators. That way, when you are sitting with your professional, it's real time, it's more real time instead of booking year end, once a year adjustments that we typically won't see until the following year,
Yeah.
right? So if we think of the delay and the timeline, we typically wouldn't see that until 2026. And then we can't really affect 2025. I would say that's one of the key areas we really work with our clients to get that timeline really nailed down
Yeah.
once they're on board with us.
No, that's great. And then how can businesses prepare for 280E exposure? Like, for example, at a state level audit? Because I do know that some of these dispensaries are getting audited still.
Yes, there's still quite a bit of audits. We're certainly seeing that
Yeah.
in the industry. For some of this IRS activity or state activity has been carrying over, but again, still pretty prevalent in the markets that we're seeing. How do they prepare, Jenny? I think one of the major issues still continues to be documentation.
Mm,
The burden of proof is on the taxpayer. So we have to be able to prove expenses were paid and more particularly now our allocation methodologies and how we're ultimately computing cost of goods sold.
yeah.
So just documenting that real time. The IRS and frankly any audit agency loves contemporaneous documentation as
Yes.
so encouraging that and just again making sure you have your documentation ready. Generally that's how we operate. We want to document the files so that they're audit ready. We're ready to go if someone comes asking.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, for example, in Colorado, they have in the rules your business records, you're responsible for keeping them maintained professionally. And that comes just from the early years in Colorado
Yep.
where people weren't professionally maintaining their business records. And then they're like, we have to put this in the rules. And so it could be that across the United States that people are expected to do a good job at documenting and having that clear, traceable, that trail that people can audit and look at.
I think we talk about this now, Jenny, and it's, of course, yes, we should be doing this. But I always like to step in the shoes of my clients. And
Hmm.
so if we think about startups and folks that are, again, they're working daily in the business, this might not be front and center for them,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
This might be one of those things that is last, frankly, on the list or goes by the wayside, or I'll get to it when I have time. And so when do we have time?
I feel like even a lot of these operators, they're drinking through a fire hose. Especially if they're a new startup and they're
Yeah,
just getting open and operational, and there's a million things coming at them at once, which is why I think it's important to have other professionals, outside professionals
gotcha.
on your team to make sure that you're not missing those things.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's they're drinking from the fire hose. They're managing just many things as expected when you're launching a new business. And some of them, cannabis is new. So a lot of layers there, but you hit it in that hopefully they're working with qualified professionals that have experience in the industry and can help guide them in these aspects.
Yeah, and the next piece I want to tackle, and I love this, the power planning. I'm not surprised. I'm sure nobody would be surprised to find out I am a planner. For all those who know me, I'm a compliance person, so I'm a planner. But I think it's true. There is a power of planning. It can really do some amazing things. And so this is going to be about financial strategy for cannabis and kind of planning versus reactive, which is the same
Sure.
in my arena. It's being proactive versus reactive, basically. So, how does aligning operations with accounting and tax one slow down these surprises that we've been talking about?
I think it's a lot of this is just effective communication, making sure that you're dialed in. I mentioned that if you're talking to your professional, let's call it your external professional
Hmm.
once a year, that's just not enough. There's so much that's going on. We know that the industry is so fast paced too, and things change. And so it's having regularly scheduled check ins and touch base calls with your external folks, whoever those are. And then if you have an internal accounting team or internal finance group, then it's having, again, regularly scheduled meetings with operations.
And that's what you recommend that cannabis operators should engage this quarterly schedule with their planners.
At a minimum,
Yeah.
Jenny, right? That's at a minimum. That really keeps everybody dialed in, is my experience. I don't work with clients that do the once a year. That is actually not our ideal client, to
Yeah.
be honest. And for the reasons that we just talked about, because things change so rapidly, that once a year is frankly a disservice to them because we're not really looped in. And maybe by the time we are looped in, it's too late to be able to affect a change,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah, and I know this to be true because I know a
Yes.
lot of CPAs that are in the cannabis industry. And when I reach out to find out, do you have a quarterly requirement? And most of them actually have that quarterly requirement of engagement, especially dispensaries, because there's so much money coming into the dispensaries. And some of them are like, oh, yeah, we won't even work with a dispensary that just wants a CPA once a year because by the time they get everything, it's a total mess that they have to sort through, and it's really challenging. It's already challenging enough and just trying to keep up with it quarterly.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's a disservice both ways. It's a
It is.
disservice to the service provider because, as you said, it's a mess. We're trying to catch up and we can't really affect a change. All we can do is now file what's been presented, etc. And for the operator, what I find is just a lot of missed opportunity. Those
Mm,
quarterly calls and engagement is an opportunity for us to even recommend, suggest, focus on specific areas of the business, but recommend and suggest changes
yeah.
that you can implement now. Change it now, right? That can affect your entire year, as opposed to, again, oh, hey, by the way, we had this issue last year. Whoopsies, we didn't tell you. I'm like, oh, we could have done this.
Wait a year to tell you.
And we had to wait a year. Um,
That, no way.
so again, ideally we're just chatting more often. And I like agendas, Jenny, too. I'm not a fan of just having meetings to have meetings. They have to be purposeful, right?
Yeah.
And so this conversation that finance, whether that's internal or external, but finance, accounting function with operations is also just so critical. And I can't understate that
Yeah.
because the impact of what operations does is viewed on the financial statements. That's what we're looking at ultimately. And so encouraging that.
I think I like that what you said because it needs to be intentional. We're just not getting on a call to get caught up. It's there has to be a reason. It's purposeful. It's strategic. It has to do with what quarter you're in, what you just went through, what's happening in the present, and then also what are we planning for in the future.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, what's coming up? What do we need to be thinking about? It's really introducing the working on the business moments
Yeah.
within your organization and being thoughtful about that and ultimately what the goals are for those types of sessions and meetings.
Yeah, I think also it's important too because you're understanding your numbers and then you can make the adjustments instead of I didn't make any adjustments and a whole year went by. But if you're having these purposeful conversations, you can adjust what's going on financially in your business. For example, I always talk about lean compliance and that people
Yes.
should be adapting these lean compliance models. It doesn't mean that you throw away compliance out the door and you don't have good compliance systems in place, but you have to think about what's important that you keep and maintain and that you're still making sure you have integrity in the business and that you're not breaking laws or having violations. But what's all the waste? Let's get rid of the waste. Let's get rid of things that don't matter that we're wasting money on. But let's make
Mhm.
sure that we're still investing in things like compliance and working with the CPA and all these really important things to keep the business kind of healthy and keep the license clean.
100%. 100%, Jenny. And you said something too that resonates with me. Again, I understand the financials and there's a line item there for compliance and there's a line item there for accounting and tax and so on. I in my heart, in my core, believe that the work that we do is an investment. It's not really an expense.
Hmm.
If you have the right provider and they get to know your business, they are a value added asset to your team.
Hmm.
And that you'll see it. You'll see that value ultimately in changes in operations, right? Those recommendations that I said earlier, the suggestions that comes from getting the right experts on your team and investing in them both in terms of dollars and in time. Because I too have clients that may say, hey, I can't make this quarter's meeting. Again, we're busy and things happen, but I'm an accountability partner. That's my role
Yeah.
too. Right. And so I'm like, let's make some time. Let's make some time.
I like that. It's true. I am an accountability partner. I'm a life coach. I'm an accountability partner. I'm the let's have the to Jesus moment
Yeah.
conversation partner.
Let's have the difficult
Yes,
conversations, partner, right?
the many hats partner.
Yeah, that's right. And I find that it's an enjoyable relationship when it's built on honesty, on trust, on really serving the greater goals.
Yeah, I agree. One of my other questions is, because I'm curious about this, what does active financial planning look like in the practice for a cannabis company? Because there's probably a lot of small operators that aren't even thinking about this. There's so much working in the business that people, I think in the beginning, they work on the business. They're getting their application, they're applying for the license, they're working on their pro forma, and they're getting all that stuff done. But then, bam, you won the license, and bam, now you got to launch, and here comes the fire hose. And then it's a fire hose for the entirety. And then it's, I used to work on the business, and now I just work in the business. Like, what does that look like, that active financial planning?
It's a great question. Active financial planning includes the cadence of conversations, these meetings that I just talked about. So that's one part of it. The other part is really attached to the goals of the operator.
Yeah.
Jenny, when I onboard a client, when I have that first introductory meeting, I always ask, what are your goals? What is the ultimate goal for you and this business? And everyone's answer is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
They don't all have the same goals, right? And so the plan then has to align with those goals. What are those? And it's essentially a work back, right? So if someone says, hey, Jessica, my intention is to run and operate this dispensary, and I believe that I may want to exit in 5 to 10 years. That's the starting point. And now we devise a plan to obtain it, to
Yeah.
accomplish it. And every year, and even if we break that down further, every quarter of every year, we're working towards that goal. And so active planning does involve having sight of what that goal is. It does involve a work back, if you will. And then in the very detailed aspect of the financial process, it requires some projections.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go? What's the business doing based on where we're at in the industry or the marketplace is at now? And you mentioned it that at the beginning, everyone has that work on the business hat on
Yeah.
because it's required. You got to fill out the application. It requires a business plan. It requires some modeling. It requires these things about what the business is going to do. And then what happens, Jenny? What happens with that plan?
Boom. It goes out the window. It
Well, it-
doesn't. Everything blows up, and then it's, oh my God, I'm an operator. I'm
and
operating.
yeah, and part of my accountability presence is to remind them, hey, you started with this goal in mind. Okay, now where are we today to ultimately achieve what you want tomorrow? And so it's constant refreshing. It's the owner operators leaning back into the business, right? Working with their teams, because this is not a solo thing. I know we're talking about the owners, but frankly, it's a team effort. I know that firsthand. They got to lean back into operations, lean back into their team to come back with answers, responses, information, data points, all of that. And that was very long winded, but
No,
hopefully some color as to, I think this phrase of planning, it gets thrown around a lot. Most recently, I've heard this term tax strategist kind of being thrown around a lot too, in respect to professionals serving businesses and individuals. There has to be an end goal so that we know what we're all working towards.
yeah, and I think planning too is what I see happen a lot And it's not even intentionally. It's because, like I said, that fire hose is happening is
Yeah.
operators get overwhelmed. And then what happens when we get overwhelmed is sometimes we can put the head in the sand because there's so much going on. And I can't take any more on my plate. And so the planning essentially keeps you from doing that. The planning keeps your head out of the sand. And there's that engagement, and you're like poking, going, oh, I got to pull my head out of the sand again. I'm back. I got to pay attention. I'm planning. And to stay on track too, there's a roadmap, but it can be adjusted quarterly. It's really important to gauge where you're at in your business for so many reasons. And there's a lot of commonalities that operators are going through. And so they're not on the island that they think they are. And that's what I think the active planning helps too. It pulls them back into reality.
Yeah, no doubt. This kind of really flips it on its head, right? So this is very proactive. This is
No, it
proactive because
is.
it's in your face, right? It's timely, it's happening. You have an accountability partner that's going to come back in and say, "Hey, what's up?" So this is very proactive. And in my experience of serving in this profession for now over 20 years, the most successful business owners are proactive
Yeah, it's
in their
true.
financial planning. The businesses that don't do well and don't survive are reactive to most situations.
Yeah, and I would say from my end, from doing this for 16 years, that's 100% true from the operations side and watching all the things that are happening. And then I think you can get away with it for a certain amount of time and then it piles on. And then
Mhm.
I've seen it where it piled on for 10 years and then it sinks the ship.
And there's something to here, Jenny, that I talk about with my clients in terms of like mental health,
Hmm.
like self care. Entrepreneurs are getting it from all places, right? There's a lot that's going on in their day to day, and there's a lot that takes up the brain space.
Yeah.
Things that weigh on us, right? Things that are on our mind, things that we need to keep top at the forefront, if you will. So I find that when we engage in this way with quarterly conversations, active dialogues, even more if needed. I have clients that we were really catching up even every 2 weeks. Okay. So again, when they're dialed in, they've told me they feel better. There's a part of the brain space that is now open to other things because they have this covered. It doesn't feel overwhelming. It no longer feels like a chore. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
And so again, that freeing up of brain space, that's critical to entrepreneurs. That's what they need to go and maybe get the next client, go do the next expansion, whatever is in their goals and game plan, right? But it gives them now more time.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been something that I've heard through clients that has been eye opening for me, where this effective, proactive, let's get it done in finance has now allowed for them to do other things and sleep well at night.
Yeah.
They sleep better. Who
And
doesn't want that?
I have clients that work 16
Mm.
hours a day. That's just running the business, and then they have to go home. They're
Yeah.
married, they have kids, and they have all those other experiences going on with family and whatnot. And it can pile on and it gets overwhelming. And yeah, I think making sure go golfing, I don't know, go for a walk, go outside. I think it's important.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier. I find that tax, finance, accounting, money, things related in this realm are sometimes uncomfortable. Again, people are scared, just not something maybe that is top of mind or that they want to address. So I say that because I do think that also weighs, right? It takes up brain space, it takes up mental capacity. You're probably not sleeping well at night, knowing that these things are unknown or really don't know what's going on. And yeah, I just think it's part of the entrepreneurship life. And
Yeah, it is.
for the folks that want to do it a different way and be proactive, this is maybe some of the upside.
Yeah, and that leads me to like looking ahead to 2026. As we turn the corner, what should cannabis operators be thinking about now?
So I'll touch on the things we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
right? So there's price compression
Mm,
happening, there's shrinking of margins. And so for me, that's really one of the main things I would recommend folks to be looking at and making honest assessments of where their respective state markets are going to be in 2026 and in 2027, even. So, for example, Michigan, we just mentioned they're going
yeah.
to see a tax increase. Those operators there really need to lean in to the impact of what that might be for 2026 and beyond and adjust their financial projections and operations accordingly.
What impact do you think that could have on operators?
There might be a decrease in demand,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we're talking about the taxes going to get passed down to the consumer, we might see less sales.
Yeah.
And less sales means maybe less production of product, right? And that might have an impact on your labor force.
Yeah.
So there's a broad impact, I think, generally on all of the operations in a business with something like that happening, right? Look at your markets, see who the players are, how much M&A activity is. Get really honest about your competitors and where you're at, maybe compared to them, pricing, SKUs. It's just a real good time to do those types of assessments internally in the operations. I think another area folks need to look at is cash flow
Mm.
projections, like really understand when money is coming in, when money needs to go out. I recommend a 13-week rolling cash flow forecast. That's what we work on with our clients. You should know your cash needs, inflows and outflows, at least for the next 3 months ahead. We work in quarters. So just understanding that. I've had conversations, and that's an area that folks just maybe don't pay attention to as much as they should. And that's the lifeline. If we don't have any cash, it's hard to run a business.
And then budget too. I think budgeting is important, but I think a lot of people sometimes they work on their budget in quarter four
Yeah.
for the following year. And then there's the actuality of doing the budget. How many people actually do a budget? Because I work on my budget probably, and this is probably really nerdy, but 4 times a week. And maybe
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's too
Super cool.
much
We're
working on the
bringing
budget.
sexy back. Bringing sexy
And
back.
I love reconciling, so I'm like reconciling my budget a couple times a week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, this is where we're looking at the future, right?
Yeah.
What is the future going to bring? I'd encourage just conversations with your team. They're the front line. They really have a great understanding of what, they're seeing in their day to day. So incorporating feedback from the team and your respective just operations of the business. But yeah, this is the time. What's the
Is
saying? If you fail to plan, you should plan to fail.
Yeah, that is a good I feel like I should put that on my website. That would be really good to have
Yeah.
on the website just to remind people, like, it's just so important to plan.
Proactive as much as you can. We can't know everything, right? So some of the things, unfortunately, we're already going to be in a reactive state
Yeah.
because we just have zero control over those. But
Yeah.
the areas that we have control over, encourage everyone to lean in.
I feel like everything that we talked about today with the planning, I want listeners to understand is it's a really good tool. Another thing that it helps with is when these unknowns happen in the cannabis industry, it's full of uncertainty. That is never going to change. I always talk about it's the ups and downs in life. And if you're actively planning, then when things happen, I think it's a lot easier to pivot and to adapt. And you're actually less reactive because you're being so
Mhm.
proactive when the curveballs come your way. And I want to write a book. It's called 5 Million Curveballs in the Cannabis Industry or something. And I'm just going to interview everybody because I have heard
Oh my gosh.
crazy
Yeah.
stories from everybody of just you can't even imagine, and you think you've heard it all and then you hear the next thing, and there's so many things that really are out of your control. And I think that being that organized and that active planning and being proactive, you handle those curveballs so much better, and it does reduce stress and it does
Yeah.
reduce the reacting piece that we're talking about.
100%, Jenny. Like I said, there's things that are we can't control, but if we're working on everything else, when those unexpected things comes, we have more brain space
We do.
to manage them, to deal with them. And frankly, because we're so dialed in to the planning, the forecasts, what's happening now and tomorrow, the introduction of the curveball is not as hard. I think you said it best. We're just much more in a better place to pivot.
Yeah. And it happens. You can't if you do not like change, the cannabis industry is not going to be for you because it is going to be full of changes, and that is not changing probably for a while. It is going to be full of uncertainty year after year, and even when federal legalization, if that happens, or rescheduling or descheduling, or the hemp ban happens or doesn't happen, but however any of that stuff happens, even then, it's still gonna be full of changes, and then you're gonna have to
Yep.
adjust to what's next when all those things happen, and that's just part of it. That's the entrepreneurial journey, especially in a new industry. People have to remember this industry is not that old. We have the legacy market, which is
Yep.
completely different
Yep.
than we're operating in the regulated industry, and it's as old as it's been going on in Colorado and Washington state, and that's about it for the regulated industry. So people have to remember, I feel like we're not even teenagers yet in this
Yeah.
industry.
Compared to others, you're right. We're still infants. We're still in diapers, maybe.
Mhm.
We're barely starting to maybe get our feet underneath ourselves in matters in DC. Don't make it easier for us. That's for
No.
certain. Yeah. Yeah.
And wrapping up, kind of what are some like last tips that you might want to leave operators with, or any kind of goals they can set for themselves this year, or even if you just want to recap just like really important things that people should be thinking about?
Absolutely. I would say if accounting, finance, tax has not been an area of focus for you in 2025, I encourage you to make it a focus
Yeah.
for 2026. It's never too late to change from reactive to proactive. I would also recommend dusting off that business plan, coming back into the mindset of working on the business versus in the business, specific for the owner operators audience that
Yeah.
are listening to this. And then lastly, just working with a qualified professional. I don't want to understate that. I think it makes a world of difference who you're working with and how active that engagement is. So again, if you're the once a year I need to do my tax return, I'd encourage you to think about switching that up too. Just get more engaged, lean in and see what can happen when you do lean in.
Beautiful. And don't forget the power of planning.
Yes. Power of planning, Jenny.
The
Thanks for
power
bringing us
of
back to that.
planning.
And of planning, as you can tell.
Thank you so much for being a guest. I really enjoyed having you on. I hope this is valuable for everyone listening. You're such a rock star, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be on here. It's a pleasure to call you my friend.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And for anyone who's looking to stream this podcast, this episode will be available on Apple and Spotify or wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And also check out my YouTube channel which is Under the Microscope with Jenny. And if you like watching videos, all the videos will be streamed on that channel, and please subscribe. So thanks everyone for tuning in today. Appreciate everyone tuning in week after week, and appreciate Jessica being our guest.
Yeah, thanks again. You can find me on social media under Jessica Velazquez, and feel free to go to beachfleischman.com to learn more about me and the services that we offer for the industry.
All right, thank you.